Okay, let's jump right in. We're doing a deep dive today into a really fascinating chapter, 2 Chronicles chapter 30.
Yeah, this one's packed. It gives us this incredible window into a really pivotal moment for both Israel and Judah.
Right. It all centers around this king, Hezekiah, making a pretty bold move, you could say,
Yeah.
trying to bring back this tradition, the Passover, that had been neglected for a long
A
time.
really long time. And it wasn't simple. He's trying to do this on a national scale, remember, across kingdoms that hadn't seen eye to eye for centuries.
So our goal here is to unpack that story. Hezekiah's big Passover plan, the hurdles he hit, the way people reacted, which was definitely mixed.
Very mixed. And what happens when, the strict rules meet the messy reality of people trying to return to God?
Exactly. We want to see what it tells us about leadership, about turning back, about grace, and honestly, about what happens when a whole community tries to seek God together, even imperfectly.
Absolutely. So it kicks off with King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. He's not acting alone here. It says he, his officials, the whole assembly, they make this collective decision
What decision?
to celebrate the Passover. It sounds straightforward, but the context is huge. This wasn't just another festival, it was the foundational celebration, and it hadn't been properly observed nationally for ages.
Okay, but then, right away, there's a twist. The timing. They decide not to do it in the first month, which is the time laid out in the law of Moses.
Right, they push it to the second month, and the text tells us why. It wasn't arbitrary.
So why the delay? What was going on?
Two big practical problems. First, not enough priests had consecrated themselves. They hadn't gone through the purification rituals needed to actually lead the sacrifices and the service.
So the religious leadership wasn't quite ready for prime time, so to speak.
You could put it that way. There just weren't enough ritually clean priests available to handle what was supposed to be a huge national event.
Okay, that makes sense. What was the second issue?
The people themselves, they hadn't gathered in Jerusalem yet. Remember, this was meant to unite all Israel, ideally. If the crowds weren't there by the first month, well,
You can't have a national celebration without the nation.
pretty much. So it seems less like defiance and more like facing reality. The priests weren't ready, the people weren't there. Postponing was the only way to actually do it.
And the text says this plan, the delay, seemed right to everyone. The king, the officials, the assembly, they were all on board with prioritizing the event over the exact date in this case.
Exactly. They agreed this was the best way forward under the circumstances. And then, having decided that, Hezekiah goes even bigger.
Bigger how?
The invitation isn't just for Judah, his own kingdom. He sends out a proclamation across all of Israel.
Wait, including the northern kingdom. The one that split off centuries ago, the one that had often been hostile. That seems ambitious.
Hugely ambitious, maybe even politically naive from one perspective. We're talking about sending messengers from Beersheba way down south, all the way up to Dan, way up north, into territory already partly ravaged by Assyria.
Wow. What did the message actually say? Just come to Passover.
Oh, it was much more than an invitation. It was a really potent call to return, to repent. They carried letters from the king urging people, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel.
Strong words.
Very strong. It directly confronts their past, saying, don't be like your fathers and brothers who were unfaithful, so that he made them an object of horror. It uses that phrase, do not be stiff-necked.
Stiff-necked, meaning stubborn, unwilling to listen or obey.
Exactly. The call was, submit to God, come to his sanctuary in Jerusalem, serve him, so his fierce anger might turn away. It linked their current troubles, like the exile and scattering, directly to their ancestors' unfaithfulness.
That's intense. Delivering that message across enemy lines, essentially? Was there any hope offered?
Yes, and this is crucial. There was this incredible promise attached. It said, essentially, if you return to the Lord, your relatives, your children who've been taken captive, they'll find compassion and maybe even come back to the land.
Whoa.
Yeah, because the Lord your God is gracious and compassionate. He will not turn his face from you if you return to him.
So it tied the religious act, returning for Passover, to this deeply personal and national hope for restoration, for families being reunited. That's powerful.
Incredibly powerful. It framed the whole thing not just as ritual, but as a potential turning point with real-world consequences. So picture these couriers going through places like Ephraim, Manasseh, Zebulun, northern territories. How do you think that went down?
Given the history, probably not great everywhere. Suspicion. Resentment.
You nailed it. The text says many people reacted with scorn and ridicule. They laughed at the couriers, mocked the message.
That's disheartening, but maybe not surprising. The divisions ran deep.
They did. It shows just how far things had drifted, spiritually and politically. But it wasn't the only response.
Ah, so some people listened.
Yes. Despite the mockery, the source says some individuals, specifically mentioning men from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun tribes from the north, they actually humbled themselves. They heard the call and decided to go to Jerusalem.
Just you? Or?
It doesn't sound like a massive wave, but it was significant. Individuals choosing to break from the cynicism and make that journey. It shows that genuine response was still possible, even amidst widespread rejection.
Okay, so a mixed bag in the north. What about in Judah, Hezekiah's own turf?
The story's different. The text says something remarkable. The hand of God was on the people in Judah to give them unity of mind.
Unity of mind.
Yeah, to carry out the king's order, which the text links to following the word of the Lord. So in Judah, there's this sense of divine orchestration creating widespread agreement and willingness to participate.
So it wasn't just Hezekiah's good idea or effective planning in Judah.
The source explicitly credits God's influence for that unity down south. It's a contrast, human effort, and mixed results in the north, divine enablement, and unity in the south.
Fascinating contrast. So despite the ridicule up north, enough people did come from various places, combined with the unified response in Judah.
That a very large crowd gathered in Jerusalem for the Feast of Unleavened Bread in that second month. They made it.
So the stage is set. Huge crowd, delayed festival. What happens first?
Preparation. Before the holy rites, they had to clean house, literally. They went through Jerusalem and removed all the unauthorized altars, the incense altars used for worship, not sanctioned by the law. Threw them into the Kidron Valley, just outside the city walls. A symbolic purging of improper worship before starting the proper worship.
Okay, city cleansed, then the main event, the Passover sacrifice.
Yes, on the 14th day of the second month, the lambs were slaughtered. But this moment reveals another wrinkle.
Oh, what now?
It says the priests and the Levites became ashamed.
Ashamed. Why?
The implication seems to be maybe seeing the size of the crowd, the sincerity of the people who had come, or just the sheer scale of the task ahead, they realized they hadn't been fully ready. Their own consecration wasn't where it needed to be.
So their shame actually motivated them.
It seems so. It spurred them to finally consecrate themselves properly and take up their appointed roles according to the law of Moses. It suggests the whole religious system had gotten a bit rusty, you know.
Yeah, it paints a picture of revival needing to happen at all levels, not just among the general populace.
Exactly. But even with newly motivated priests, there was another huge issue. A logistical one and a ritual one.
What was that?
The law generally presumed families or groups would slaughter their own Passover lambs, provided they were ritually clean. But the text states flat out, many in the crowd had not consecrated themselves.
Uh-oh. So loads of people show up wanting to participate, but they're technically unclean, impure.
Ritually impure, yes. They hadn't done the required purification rites. So, according to the letter of the law, they shouldn't participate, especially not eat the Passover meal.
This sounds like a potential disaster for Hezekiah's big unity event. What did they do?
They improvised, or rather, adapted significantly. The Levites stepped in.
Levites? How?
They ended up slaughtering the Passover lambs for everyone who was unclean. This was a major departure from the norm, where Levites assisted priests but didn't typically do the slaughtering for individuals.
So they bent the rules quite a bit to accommodate the reality of the crowd's condition.
They did. It seems driven by a desire not to turn away those who'd come with sincere hearts, even if they weren't technically ready. And this leads directly to maybe the most surprising fact in the whole chapter.
Which is?
Many people, especially those travelers from the northern tribes, Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, they went ahead and ate the Passover meal anyway.
Even though they were unclean.
Even though they were unclean. And the chronicler explicitly notes this was contrary to what was written in the law.
Wow. So they came all that way, the rules were bent for the sacrifice, but then they participated in the meal itself while breaking a fundamental purity requirement.
Yeah.
That puts Hezekiah in a really tough spot.
A very tough spot. He spearheaded this return to the law, and now a huge chunk of the participants are openly violating parts of it. What does a leader do?
Yeah, what does he do? Shut it down. Condemn them.
He does something completely different, something remarkable. He sees the situation. These people came, they humbled themselves. Their hearts were set on seeking God, even if their ritual status wasn't right. And he prays for them.
He prays for the rule breakers.
Yes, and his prayer is recorded. It's incredible. He asks, "May the Lord, who is good, pardon everyone who sets his heart on seeking God, even if he is not clean according to the rules of the sanctuary."
That's amazing. He's appealing to God's goodness and asking for pardon based on their intention, their heart's desire, not their ritual cleanliness.
Exactly. He's prioritizing the inward reality, the heart set on seeking God over the outward ritual requirement in this specific extraordinary circumstance.
It says a lot about his understanding of God, doesn't it?
It really does. It suggests he saw God's grace as potentially bigger than the letter of the law, especially in a moment like this. Did God answer?
Immediately. The very next verse says, "And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people."
Healed them. Healed them from what? It just mentioned they ate well and clean.
Right. The timing is key. The text doesn't say they got sick then healed. It seems the healing was God's response to the prayer for pardon concerning their uncleanness. It likely means God protected them from any negative consequence prescribed by the law for eating holy things while impure.
So it was a healing in the sense of averting judgment, a spiritual restoration or acceptance despite the breach.
That seems the most likely reading. God accepted Hezekiah's intercession and the people's sincere though imperfect worship. He essentially healed the situation caused by the ritual infraction, showing his favor. Wow. Okay, so God accepts this imperfect offering, mediated by Hezekiah's prayer. What did that do for the mood of the festival?
It seems to have just unleashed this incredible wave of joy. The text emphasizes it repeatedly. They celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread for the initial 7 days with great rejoicing.
You can almost feel the relief and gratitude.
Totally. And it wasn't just quiet contemplation. The Levites and priests were singing daily, using the Lord's instruments of praise. Hezekiah was actively encouraging the Levites, praising their good understanding of the service. People were eating, offering fellowship sacrifices, praising God.
It sounds like a party broke out, a holy party.
It really does. And the joy was so contagious, so overwhelming, that the whole assembly spontaneously decided, let's do it again.
That's why they extended it.
For another 7 days. 14 days total of joyful celebration. This wasn't planned, it just erupted from the shared experience.
14 days. That's unprecedented for Passover and unleavened bread, isn't it?
Absolutely. And during that extra week, the positive momentum kept building. The text notes that even more priests consecrated themselves during that time.
So the revival was deepening, even as it happened.
Seems like it. And the generosity was flowing, too. King Hezekiah provided thousands of animals for sacrifices. His officials provided thousands more. It was a feast in every sense.
Who was included in all this joy? Was it just the Judahites?
No, the text makes a point of saying everyone rejoiced together. The people of Judah, the priests, the Levites, all those who had come down from the northern kingdom of Israel, and even the aliens or foreigners who lived among them. A rare picture of unity.
That sounds incredible. Unity, joy, generosity, extended celebration.
And the chronicler puts a historical capstone on it. He says there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the days of Solomon, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem.
Since Solomon. That's going back centuries, back to the golden age of the United Kingdom.
Exactly. It elevates this event to something truly special, a high watermark of national worship and joy not seen in generations, despite all the imperfections leading up to it.
And how does the chapter end?
It ends beautifully. The priests and Levites stand up, they bless the people, and the final line says their prayer was heard, their voice reached his holy dwelling place in heaven.
So it concludes with this sense of divine acceptance, of connection restored.
Precisely. From a shaky start, through rule bending and a plea for grace, to an unparalleled explosion of joy and a blessing that reached heaven, it's quite a journey.
It really is. This whole dive into 2 Chronicles 30, it just paints such a vivid picture. You see bold leadership trying to spark revival against the odds.
Yeah, and you see the reality of resistance, the messiness of dealing with rules versus people's actual state, the shortcomings even within the religious system itself.
But then that central tension, the strict law versus this sincere heart-seeking God, and Hezekiah's prayer pushing towards grace.
And God's response, that healing, that acceptance despite the ritual flaws, seems to be the key that unlocked that unprecedented joy. It suggests that showing up with a heart wanting God, even imperfectly, can lead to amazing things.
So when you think about it, this isn't just some dusty old story. It's about that constant human effort to connect with something bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it's about how communities try to do that together, stumbling sometimes, facing opposition, but finding grace and incredible joy when the focus is truly on seeking God.
Which leaves us with something to think about, maybe. That specific detail about God healing the people right after they ate while unclean, following Hezekiah's prayer for pardon based on their hearts.
What does that tell you, really, about what God prioritizes? Is it perfect rule following above all else, or is there something profound about the intention, the seeking heart that can, in moments like these, allow grace to cover the gaps? Something to definitely ponder.